Hi and welcome to another reading for Voices of Calm. We are back for the second part of a reading from a book called Coming Home to Billabong by Mary Grant Bruce. And Denis Daly is going to introduce you to the cast.
Okay, thanks for joining us at Voices of Calm. Today's cast is Sarah Bacaller from Melbourne as the narrator, Lucy Bacaller, her daughter, also from Melbourne obviously, as Nora, David Prickett from Sydney as Jim, Elizabeth Chambers, also from Sydney, as Wally, Elizabeth Blackett from the lovely Sunshine Coast as Mrs. Brown, and I'll be playing the part of Mr. Linton. So it's over to our narrator.
Okay, so Coming Home to Billabong, Part 2. It was a merry meal, and if the fare was no better than that of most township hotels, the spirits of the party were too high to trouble about such trifles as tough meat, watery puddings, and weary butter that bore out Wally's remarks about the heat by threatening to float away on a sea of its own oil. Everything was rose-colour in Nora's estimation that day. She sat by Jim and beamed across the table at her father and Wally. Even Cecil found himself at times included in the beam and took it meekly, for the happy face was infectious, while the frank delight of the boys in having her with them again was, to a certain extent, educational to the outsider. There was no lack of manliness in Jim's strong, handsome face. If he found it was worth his while, Cecil reflected, to make such a fuss over a child, it might be possible that she was not altogether a person to be snubbed. So he was unusually affable to his small cousin, and lunch passed off very successfully. Afterwards, there was shopping to be done. A long list of groceries had been made out by Mrs. Brown, who professed herself far too busy with Christmas preparations to come in person, and had laid the responsibility on Nora, not without misgivings. It was perhaps fortunate that the storekeepers were able to rise to the contents of the list unaided, for Nora was scarcely in a condition to grapple with problems relating to anything so ordinary as groceries, and found it indeed difficult to read out her list coherently, with Jim standing sentinel in the doorway and Wally wandering about the shop, sampling all he could find, from biscuits to brooms. On one occasion, when making a special effort to preserve her dignity, she came to the item flaked oatmeal and asked the shopman in rather frigid tones for floaked oatmeal, which had a paralysing effect on the unoffending storekeeper, while Wally retired to the shelter of a pile of saucepans and shrieked. Thus the business of necessary purchases passed off cheerfully, and then what Nora termed the more interesting shops, saddlers and stationers, were visited with a view to Christmas. Finally, Jim brought the buggy from the hotel, and they picked up their lighter parcels.
Surely that's all?
Jim inquired, as Nora and Wally came out of the fruiterer's, laden with bags of assorted sizes, which they dumped thankfully into the buggy, with the immediate result that a bag of peaches burst and had to be rescued from all over the floor.
No, you'll not have a penny left, and we'll all be violently ill if we eat half what you've bought. Come on home.
Nora climbed into the buggy.
Brownie's laid in a large stock of medicine, she says, so you needn't worry, need you? But we've truly finished now, Jim, I think. Ready, Wally?
Quite. I've put these peaches in with the neat's foot oil, and it seems a beautiful arrangement.
Wally nimbly hopped up onto the buggy.
Righto, Jimmy, and pray remember, I am nervous.
I will.
Jim grinned. He laid the whip on the ponies' backs, and they shot forward with a bound, unused to such liberties. They went down the main street of Cunjee in a whirl of dust and turned over the bridge spanning the river, where the ponies promptly rose on their hind legs at the sight of Dr. Anderson's motor and betrayed a rooted disinclination to come down from that unusual altitude. Jim handled them steadily, and presently they were induced to face the snorting horror wherein the doctor sat, waving his hand and calling cheery Christmas greetings as they shot past, to which the three responded enthusiastically. Cunjee sank into the distance behind them. The miles flew past. On the metalled road, the rubbered tyres spun silently, and only the flying hoofs clattered, and soon they had left the made road and turned on to the hard-beaten track that led to Billabong, where progress was even smoother. The tongues flew almost as swiftly as the wheels. The hot sun sank gradually, and the evening breeze sprang up. It was a time for quick questions and answers. Nora wanted details of the term just over, the sports, the prize-giving, and had to laugh over messages from those of Jim's boy friends whom she knew. And Jim had 100 things to ask about home: the cattle, the fishing, his horses, his dogs, Brownie, and the prospects of fun ahead. They roared over her ducking and subsequent encounter with Cecil, and chaffed her unmercifully.
Such a mudlark. And that prim young man. Oh, Nora, you are a dream. I'd have given something to see your face.
I was altogether worth seeing. When I caught sight of myself in a glass, I really didn't wonder at Cecil.
Jim glowered and referred to the absent Cecil as a silly ass. They turned in at the last homestead gate, and the ponies fairly flew up the long paddock, something in the spirits of their drivers communicating itself to them. The house was not visible until the track had passed through a thick belt of trees, and as they came to this, Jim fell silent, looking keenly ahead. Then the red roof came into view, and the boy drew a long breath.
There's the old place. My word, I am glad to be home.
Under the dust rug, Nora slipped her hand onto his knee.
It's just lovely to have you, both of you. You're glad too, aren't you, Wally?
I could sing.
Once you could, but for some years.
Beast. If you weren't driving.
And you weren't nervous.
There'd be wigs of green. I'll drive if it would be any convenience to either of you.
We'll postpone it. There's Brownie at the gate, bless her old heart.
They shot up the last furlong of the drive. At the big gate of the yard, very few people, not even bishops, got to the front gate of a bush homestead. Brownie stood, her broad face beaming. As they pulled up, Murty O'Toole came forward to take the horses, a marked compliment from Murty, who, like most head stockmen, was a free and independent soul. Jim went over the wheel with a bound and seized Brownie's hand.
How are you, Brownie dear?
The size of him, the shoulders. No wonder they had you for captain of the football 11 then, my dear.
The boys grinned widely.
If not 11, then it's 4. Strange I can't even remember which, and it don't signify anyhow. Welcome home. And you too, Master Wally.
How are you, Murty?
Jim shook hands with the stockman, while Wally bowed low over Brownie's hand.
I've lived for this moment. Brownie, you grow younger every time I go away.
Naturally.
Be silent, minx. Who are you to break in on a heart-to-heart talk anyhow? At this present moment, Mrs. Brown, you look 17.
Get along with you now, do. You're no better than you was, I'm afraid, Master Wally. All is ready for a joke.
Joke? Anyone who'd make a joke of you, Brownie, would rob a church. Jim might, but I.
Jim tipped the orator's hat over his eyes.
Perish the idea. Come and take things out of the buggy.
Across the yard came Mr. Linton, surrounded by a mixed assemblage of dogs. Puck and the collie had already hurled themselves upon Jim in a delirium of joy. Cecil strolled after his uncle, looking slightly amused at the scene by the gate.
We're quite a family. I begin to feel like Mr. Pickwick at a Christmas gathering. Do you think Billabong will stand the crowd, Mrs. Brown?
It looks to me, sir, as if Billabong's going to have a time of its life.
And that's the end of our second excerpt from Coming Home to Billabong by Mary Grant Bruce. Thanks for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope that it has brought you some moments of calm and enjoyment.
So please feel free to check out the Voices of Calm YouTube channel for more recordings and presentations like this. Thank you and goodbye.